In 2007, the methods of studying people and public life were taken to New York. Like many other North American cities, New York had focused entirely on traffic efficiency and built a gigantic system of highways that connected with suburban homes hours away.
Robert Moses, in the 1950s, brought an extraordinary amount of change to New York City. And he built a lot of expressways, roadways. So moving quickly is certainly still a very strong part of the legacy that we have from Robert Moses. And thinking big is also a big part of that.
And if you're planning, if you're a Moses-type planner, you want to control that as much as possible. And by controlling it, you really sort of extinguish that possibility for life to pop up, because you streamline things, you separate functions, you separate work from play, from leisure, and you think about it in a very concrete system that's an equilibrium. But that's not what makes places fantastic. That's not what made the city great then or what is making it great now.
100 years ago or 60 years ago, the car was new. It held the promise for the future. It seemed to be the way of progress. Now we've grown up. We've seen what a fully built out automobile world is like. And we see a lot of the negative side effects that people maybe could have appreciated were going to happen 80 years ago, but we're living in a world that's choked with traffic everywhere, where we've made our own human living environment deadly for people. I mean, we've destroyed the human living environment with all of this traffic, and people see that, and they also realize you can't build your way out of traffic. I mean, we've tried to plow highways through neighborhoods, to double-deck highways, to do everything that we could think of, and we've failed.
No, this isn't good enough. We've been resting on our laurels for so long, so there was this desire to move beyond that paradigm of Moses.
And there's no question, if you're a New Yorker, you know that the city needs to change. Our city has been outdated, and our systems have been outdated. And so this took a big picture view in saying, okay, we're going to actually leverage this growth to our advantage by investing in our key infrastructure systems and looking at that as a way to bring the city into a state of repair and a state of competitiveness that was, would make us the greatest, greenest city in the world.
If you see pictures of Times Square before, the image of New York was always sort of fast-moving taxis through Times Square, or people, hailing a cab. There was a very dominant, I think, kind of car culture of New York City. The traffic planners had become maybe the most powerful people in the city.
The DOT had never measured pedestrian traffic. They had never, they'd only been counting cars. They had no quantitative tools for measuring, the pedestrian experience. And so really, there's an adage that is so true in the business world, which is that you care about what you measure. They were simply maximizing the wrong thing. So to refocus all of those engineers and planners, you needed new quantitative tools, and you needed to give them new benchmarks and new goalposts. And that's what Yan helped us do. Get the baseline data, set some targets. Now let's plan our street to meet them.
Really, our first task was to survey streets and spaces and monitor how people are walking, how they're spending time in the streets, what type of activities they're engaging in, where they're spending time, their use patterns, all sorts of data that basically didn't exist before. The city had a lot of data about private vehicles, but didn't have a lot of data about people.
%90 of the roadway in Times Square was allocated to cars and only 10% to people. And yet 90% of the people who use the space were pedestrians and only 10% cars. So we needed to change the math.
What Times Square has no square 89% of it isn't even a square. That's very simple to understand, and people can react to it and demand more. No place to sit along Broadway. Everyone understands that's a real shame. So we were able to, I think, with some very simple, very even maybe banal observations, frame them in a political context that allowed everyone to say, you know what, this street is underperforming. This is not worthy of a world-class city.
The plan was to define a new way to move in the city. Broadway would be closed for traffic along the major squares from uptown to downtown. And a network of bike lanes would be built to connect with surrounding boroughs.
We're very opinionated in New York City, so there were 8.4 million opinions about what should be done.
You cannot implement European culture in America. We don't need any bicycle lanes in New York City because people don't like to ride bicycle. Because people don't have time to ride bicycle. Monday to Friday, American life is like machine.
Any type of the suggestion of change was met with resistance because it affected their everyday routine. And I think what this change was spurred on by was more of an alignment, a mechanism essentially. And I think that mechanism was the pilot project process. Overnight, essentially, the street was closed, chairs put in, tons of people used it. There was this huge latent demand that existed the entire time that just souped into this area. But it wasn't quite good enough. People were saying, complaining, this is cheap folding chairs from Costco. That's not New York City. That's not Times Square. So not long after that, they needed to revise their approach and get some better quality furniture. The idea was doing something and giving people a chance to experience it, not doing the perfect thing and making it right from day one. It's a shift from the one heroic vision to a more iterative evolution of what cities can become.
Giving people just a little bit of a taste of what their lives could be like every day of the year if simply the space were designed and managed for them and for their kids and for the neighborhood. And I am so encouraged by the fact that New York has 50 million visitors a year now, and all of those visitors to our city are now seeing Times Square. Bicycles everywhere, and they're taking that back to Kansas City. They're taking that back, to Minneapolis and elsewhere, and they're saying, you know what, my idea of a city has just been transformed. My idea of a city street is now different than it was before, and that's precisely what America needs right now, because we have had this love affair with the automobile, for 100 years, and the oil's running out, and people want a different lifestyle.
At Times Square, there was a snowball fight that took place, completely spontaneous, completely unplanned. And it's not like I ever thought, hey, we're going to reclaim space here and there's going to be a snowball fight.
That maybe wildness, of a city can really only happen when you have a critical mass of people living their lives in the public realm. When everyone's shuttered indoors, there's no vitality, there's no spontaneity, and it's a living thing. It's a wellspring of human interaction that is always, I think, feeding us. And you know it when you see it. You know it when you walk down the street, in Copenhagen. You can see that organic human quality that I think good cities have.